master's and a PhD. So the first is a master's. So a master's is technically a technical credentials edition. Um, there are two paths. There's first like the thesis, which is more of a research-based option, and there's also the capstone, which is more of like we would say like a technical based. Master's programs usually take about 1 to 2 years, and kind of the pros and cons here. So first is pros. It does stand out make you stand out from other bachelor students. Obviously, you have an extra set of credentials again, and it opens opportunities for more jobs. So, if you guys have applied for jobs, there are some job postings that do require you to have a master's degree. You also get slightly higher pay, like if you're just doing entry level, and you also get access to topic focus opportunities. So, a lot of times, for instance, when there are certain jobs that are looking for like slightly more specific areas. So let's say like a software engineer versus a software engineer that like has applied machine learning. Um, they do prefer people who have like a master's in that area, if that makes sense. And so doing a master's, it is possible to do a master's while you're doing full-time work. So there's a lot of my friends, colleagues who are doing their job full-time, but they are doing their master's, part-time. And so obviously this allows them to, two birds, one stone, but obviously doing a master's would most likely take longer than a year or two. And the final pro is that it opens some teaching opportunities. So as a as a master's graduate, you do get opportunities or the credentials to teach at community colleges and possibly some colleges. I'm sure some of the professors you might know might have masters, but a handful of them do have PhDs. So, the cons of getting a master's is that it's usually not sponsored, so you would be paying out of pocket unless you have a scholarship like I did. I did get a partial scholarship, so I did have to end up paying, I'd say like 70% of tuition. But yeah, it is money there that you have to spend. Uh, and another con as a master's student is that TA and research positions are much harder to obtain. The reason why that is because PhDs usually have their priority, right? So in schools, CS and in any school is really impacted. And so there are a lot of, there's only a certain amount of TA opportunities and research opportunities. So a lot of those opportunities and positions are usually given to the PhDs first. Master students rarely get those types of opportunities. You really have to stand out, get to really know the professors, and it's very, I'd say relatively difficult to get into those TA research positions. I'd say out of all the master students that I've met over the years, I would probably say uh, in terms of like an official research position, I am the only one who has had an official research position. TAs, it's easier to come by, but uh, yeah, still very difficult. Okay, so moving on. Now we have PhDs. So PhDs are more research focused degrees. And the reason why I say this is because your PhD will take 4 to 6 years. And during that time, you are simply just doing research and pushing out papers. It's very research heavy. So all you're doing for your PhD is just writing a bunch of papers, and at the end of it, once you've written a number of papers, then you get your paper. You're specialized in this topic enough, and your advisor says that what, I think this is a good amount, and so they give you a PhD. Um, PhDs to open up opportunities to teach in college. So any of the colleges that you can list, uh, you can you can apply and be qualified to teach it. Uh, but you can also, excuse me, um, with this PhD, you can also not only do teaching, but you can also do research for schools or companies with that PhD. So there are a lot of research positions, let's say, like even in the industry that require you to have a PhD to apply. So again, getting a PhD will give you the opportunity to apply for these positions. Uh, Another pro to PhDs is that they are paid. You're not paid a lot, but you are being paid. And so you don't have to put anything out of pocket. Uh, And in contrast to masters, you are getting priority for TA positions and research positions. Obviously, the research position is kind of a given because you're working directly with an advisor. Again, but if you wanted a TA position, you are also in priority. And so some of the cons to getting a PhD are that it does close off certain positions for you. So, for instance, if you get a PhD, um, you have spent a lot of time putting, you know, effort into this degree, and so that does make you overqualified in the sense that a lot of companies might not hire you for an entry level position, let's say like as a data scientist or a software engineer. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not preferred. People will think that you're overqualified. Even like with a master's degree, I, you know, for instance, this is mostly the case for PhDs, but even for like a master's degree, when I was applying to like a certain division in NVIDIA in Canada, uh, they pretty much rejected me outright because they said I was overqualified. Uh, Not really sure what that means, but anyway, so yeah, it is possible that you might be overqualified for the positions that you want to apply for after your PhD. So basically choose, whether or not you want to do this wisely. And another downside is that if you do decide to do like a part-time PhD where you're not really doing your PhD full-time and writing papers full-time, um, easily, easily, you will burn like a decade of your life just doing research and never getting a PhD. I've met people who have done that. I mean, obviously, I think for them, they enjoy it, but that is also something to take note of. So again, for MCS and MBAs, so for those of you who don't know, MCS is Masters of Computer Science, and then MBAs are just basically like a Master's in Business, like to generalize. So the reason why I'm not talking about today is um, yeah, I think my expertise mainly lies in Masters of Science programs and then just my knowledge in PhDs. Again, I do know in terms of like distinctions, MCS is basically a even more technical degree where you're not required to do a thesis or necessarily a capstone. It is a lot more like a lot of the coursework that is required is more it's less technical and more technical in the sense of like you might have classes that are like actually having you like that are teaching you and having you work on like software engineering problems or things like that. Less theoretical than a master's of science degree, and the requirements are slightly less in terms of like in terms of graduation. Again, like I said, you don't have to write a thesis or to complete capstone, and a lot of times master CS programs are generally easier to get into. MBAs, those MBAs usually teach you more about like leadership, how to do business, and so again, that's not necessarily my expertise, but um, again, that is another form of a graduate degree if you decide to do so. Um, but anyway, moving forward. So a lot of you might be asking why. Well, why do a graduate degree? A lot of people that have asked me this question, they're like, well, why don't I just graduate and then just get a job? And so here are the couple of reasons that you would want to. And so first is that you like to learn. Um, like I said earlier, when I went to UCLA, I learned about quantum programming, and that's not something I could do um, out in the field and just doing work, right? Because it's such a new area. But if you like to learn, if you like to do research, um, it could be an opportunity for you to do those things. Um, like I say here, right? If you want to pursue a field in academia, right? So a master's can be kind of a stepping stone to figure out whether or not you want to pursue a PhD. So I think a lot of the purpose for your master's or a PhD, especially your master's, you have to be very, very careful and very, very objective to asking yourself why. Um, my reason personally was mainly because I did research with Dr. John Cora, but I wanted to, do a little bit more research as well. So I want to possibly explore the option of maybe doing PhD, but also just because I wanted to, learn more interesting things, especially because like I had an offer from UCLA. I really felt that it would be a great opportunity for me to not only like learn a lot of things, but also like network. So yeah, that'd be another reason why you want to pursue a PhD. So another reason why you might want to pursue a graduate degree is if you want to specialize and learn more about a specific subfield. So let's say, obviously you can graduate with a bachelor's degree, taking a couple of courses about, let's just say cybersecurity. But you want to do research, or you want to learn more or take more advanced coursework that's maybe not offered at your school, um, and learn more about cybersecurity and become more specialized. And so doing a master's would be like an entry, like a good entry point to achieving this. A PhD is obviously way more down the line, like you're basically specializing yourself, and that's like could be your focus, and that's um, the idea that like the topic that you'll be wanting to spend and research on for your PhD. Um, so yeah, if you want to learn about specialize and learn more about a specific subfield. And another point is that if you're curious and you just want to know more about the bleeding edge of the world's CS knowledge. So again, like maybe like the basic, like the very forefront of what cybersecurity research is offering us today. It could be your chance to work on that, to experiment, to work with those people. Um, yeah, and then I would say the last point would be mostly these degrees will help you network. Uh, Again, it can help you open you to different various jobs, and also gain a lot of valuable experience, especially in top 20 schools. So here I know this picture is a bit blurry, but this is one of my postdoctorate uh, colleagues back when I was at UCLA. His name's Hong Jin, and he's now a professor in a school in Australia. But here's what he had to say about why he wants to pursue a PhD. And he basically says, my main motivation was to work on challenging and interesting problems, which is usually hard to find in the industry. PhD is also usually opens up doors to interesting and rewarding jobs. So, off the quote, I remember when we talked about this, he's worked in the industry before. Basically, he's from Singapore, and so after his bachelor's and his PhD, he had served in the military, I believe, and then he came back, went to the industry, and just found that a lot of the industry work was boring, redundant, and it just wasn't intellectually stimulating for him, and so that's why he went back to do a postdoc. And so, okay, we have all these reasons about why we should do a graduate go to grad school. Like learning more, better credentials, etc. So why wouldn't you want to go to grad school? So the first and most important thing I think is just not having the passion. Like I mentioned before, if you want to go to grad school, you have to have a good reason. And I think one thing I forgot to mention is that another reason why you might want to go to grad school is, obviously the job market right now, as I'm sure most of you know, is relatively difficult, and so this might be the time for you to stay in school, um, retain that student position for those internships, and give yourself more time to, train and get a job. So that's another reason. That's another big reason I think now why people are doing grad school, especially like masters instead of PhDs, because masters again smaller commitments, fewer less time, right? But excluding that, back to why not. So if you don't have the passion to learn, to stay in school, then definitely don't go to grad school. Uh, it'll probably be miserable for you. You won't enjoy it. Um, and if you ever want to go back to grad school, you can. Like I said, there's always you can always do it part time, and uh, yeah, like I said in this last one here, um, if you do get a job out of like grad school, uh, that company that you're working for could pay for your master's, so you wouldn't have to put any money down to get your graduate degree, and you could just do that. Um, Another reason, again, kind of connected to the last point, is that you might get a job offer. So let's just say you decide that you want to go to grad school, and maybe you just apply. You apply and you get a couple offers back, and then you're also applying for jobs and get a job offer. And so in this case, you really have, I would say, three choices, right? The first choice would be to, obviously not take the job and then just go to your master's. The second would be to take the job and then do your master's at the same time, or you just simply just take the job and not do your master's. So um, yeah, those are just open options that you can consider. But again, when considering to like apply for these programs, definitely think about if you have the passion to you know stick it out and like take those classes and possibly write a thesis or do a capstone. Okay, back to Hongjin. So here are some of his wise words that he has decided to share with you guys. But he basically says, a recommendation would be to plan ahead and decide when they plan to do after grad school. So, different goals like a tenure track, professor, teaching position, or jobs at specific companies usually requires different choices during their PhD, different choice of topics, different types of internships, etc. Another point is that postdocs, and then he mentions another point about postdocs. Postdocs are basically just research opportunities that you do after your doctorate degree to further work with the advisor that you're working with and to do additional research. But yeah, postdocs are for people who are looking to become a professor but didn't sufficiently distinguish themselves during their PhD. Hong Jin did a postdoc because he's always liked Miriam's research, and he got the chance to work with her. So again, Miriam is the advisor in our lab, and yeah, so he used to work with her before during his PhD. He was doing his PhD in Singapore. Yeah. Okay, so now with that all of the way, now with that out of the way, I just want to talk briefly about the application process. So the application process is pretty similar to how you apply to come to college. So first, you're going to need your transcripts. So grades are pretty important, and if you want to go to grad school, don't fall behind your classwork. Um, I would say that a lot of the general consensus, or what I hear people say, for people who are trying to apply for jobs, that GPAs don't matter. And while that's somewhat true, it is exponentially more important when you are applying for grad school. Okay, the second is essays. So just like when you're applying to your bachelor's degrees, you do have to write essays. So they are going to be similar to your college application essays, again, like you did for your bachelor's. But a lot of these essays are not required for, yeah, not some of these essays aren't required, but the main essay that you will have to write is a statement of purpose, which is basically explaining why you want to go to school there, why you want to do masters. So again, that brings back to the key point of having a great purpose. Okay, and the third thing is letters of recommendation. So this is probably one of the most important parts of the application. You'll need anywhere from about 2 to 4 people for your application. And so you're going to need people who can, give you, I guess, a good letter of rec. And so a lot of this might come from, your professors. And so if you haven't gotten to know your professors already and you are maybe considering grad school or not, I'd say just a general great rule of thumb is to just get to know your professors more. And that will help you in the future, especially if you want letters of recommendation. Um, and the last are test scores. So the test that you have to take for grad school is similar to SAT, but it's called the GRE. It's just a elevated level of the SAT, and it is the most common test that you need to apply to some of these schools. A lot of these schools now are not requiring you to submit a GRE score, but it does. But they obviously do accept it, and some schools actually do require it. So if you are applying and you're planning to apply, you should plan out what schools you're applying for, check if they need the GRE, and obviously, if none of the schools that you want to apply for need the GRE, then don't bother. But again, if you have the GRE score and you do really well, it doesn't hurt. Okay, so that kind of sums it up. Yeah, and generally sums it up. But I'll talk about a little bit about my experience briefly. So Yeah, so my process for applying to grad school, during my last year, so my third year at Cal Poly, I was trying to think about what to do, right? So um, at this point in time, I haven't had any, like like real internship. Like I haven't had any like software engineering internships, and so I had like one QA internship, which is like quality assurance. Basically, I was just testing out like circuit boards all day, and so I was figuring out whether or not I wanted to uh, continue in school. And so I decided that I wanted to. And I wanted to see if like a PhD was maybe something I'd be interested in. I think the research experience I got at Cal Poly was okay, but I think I want to experience more of it at a different caliber. And so yeah, I applied to grad school, and yeah, I got a couple. So obviously, when applying grad school, there were a couple of schools that needed GRE. So during, let's see, I think it was during the beginning of the year, um, like of the school year, I started studying for the GRE, started taking it. I think I took it twice. But yeah, on my second one, I think yeah, I didn't really have time to take another one, but I think I was relatively okay with my score. But even if I wasn't, I didn't have enough time. So yeah, it was coming around, I think December, I applied to about 11 or 12 schools. Um, I think in terms of what schools I got into, I got into, let's see, I don't remember all of them, but I remember some of them. Obviously, I got into UCLA. I got into USC with a half ride, like a half ride scholarship. I also got into UCI, and then let's see, waitlisted onto UCSD. I was waitlisted to Berkeley, and then I think the rest of the schools rejected me. So obviously, and then yeah, I think that was yeah. I think that yeah, I think that about sums it up. Yeah. So yeah, I decided to go. I was pretty on like the bar between like UCLA and USC. Um, but yeah, it's ended up deciding to go to UCLA, and yeah, UCLA, now being finished and graduating this year, I think it was a really great experience. During the first year, I mainly just took courses and I was good to do research, but had a handful of life incidents happen. So I was planning to finish my master's degree in a year, but it ended up taking two. Um, and so, yeah, but during that second year, I really met a lot of great people, talked to a lot of professors, got to know a lot of people. Did ended up doing research for the lab with Dr. Kim and Hong Jin, and had a really good time meeting them and picking their brains and talking to them and working with them. And I still talk to them to this day, and I met a lot of great people, great students, great colleagues, and honestly, it was a very I learned a lot during that time, not only from I'd say the coursework and the professors, but also just the other students that I was surrounded by, and uh, yeah, yeah, it was a good experience, and I think to anyone who is wanting to pursue um, research or uh, they're interested in that type of work, I would definitely recommend it to anyone, or at least to look into it. If it interests you at all, I definitely recommend you to look into it. But yeah, that pretty much sums up I guess, like a brief summary of my journey. But that's pretty much all I have for the presentation. And yeah, I'm open to any questions that you guys have. Sorry, you guys are muted, so I don't. Yeah.
I think we got questions in the chat.
Oh, all right. Let me take a look. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Okay. What is the general recommended GPA I would need to have a good chance to get into a graduate program? So I think the bare minimum would probably be 3.0 in most cases. For some schools, though, however, I think UCLA and some other schools have this too. You have to have a GPA of 3.5 or above to even apply. So I'd say like a good baseline would be I would probably say 3.5, but I wouldn't be discouraged if you don't have a 3.5. I'd say if you have above a three, but obviously the higher the better. Yeah, let me know if you have follow-up. Justin asks, are capstone focused master's degrees evaluated similarly to thesis focused degree? Do you have to defend or present your capstone some way? So yeah, this is something that I don't think I really touched on, but the difference between thesis and master's is that a thesis is definitely more focused on the research side of like your like the it's like more you are doing more research, and you do have to write a paper. And in some schools, you do have to defend that thesis and give a presentation on it, like a master's thesis defense. Luckily for my program, we didn't have to do that, and I think it depends on the professor as well. But I didn't have to defend my thesis. But I worked very closely with my professor to make sure that my thesis wasn't subpar per se. So, but for capstones, so a thesis again, you're writing a paper. You're writing a lot of papers are range from my paper was about 30 pages, which I think was ample. But a lot of people like to make it very, very long for I would say no reason. But people like to make it over 100 pages. So that's like the thesis, and it takes more time and effort. Capstone is basically it's like almost like a school project, but you're working like on a professor with it, and you have to like write a report. I don't think you have to defend it. Again, this might vary from school to school and from professor to professor, but in the general case, you don't have to defend your capstone, but it is mainly just like a project. I would say it's like a school project, but but you're working directly with the professor and maybe their PhD students. Okay, Mark asks, can you get the same jobs like ML software developer with an info/software systems engineering focus in computing degree as a CS degree, since they both have the word compute? Okay. I would say it's possible. Like it's not impossible. Um, as long as you have the skills and they interview you and you have the skills for it and you meet their basic requirements, then yes. Um, yeah, in terms of like focus, I would say that it's not it. It doesn't like from an interviewer perspective and like the recruiter, it doesn't necessarily like connect any dots, but obviously if you like speak to them or you have a connection to them, then you might get a chance. And obviously if you have the skills for the ML software developer position, then definitely possible you could get the same job. And then Johnny asks, how important are relevant experiences for grad apps? So I would say relevant experiences, especially for grad school, would be research. One of the best ways to prepare for your application for grad school, I would say, is research, like research on your resume and things that you can like present to these like to the admissions office. So for instance, during my time when I was researching with Dr. Cora, I had like a research poster that I made for the research conference there at Cal Poly. And so that was like something tangible that I was able to send to the admissions office and show them um, like a relevant experience. But yeah, I would say research, something tangible from your research. And then I'd probably say second to that would probably be, you know, I'd probably say like internships. I definitely think that uh, like my NASA JPL internship and me entering like me doing that internship or like putting that on my on my application definitely helped. Um, but yeah, I'd probably say, but I would say like that's like the second importance. I'd say the most important is uh, probably say research, something tangible from research. Okay, and then someone from their iPhone says, "How can I make myself competitive for master programs since I want to get a TA position or scholarship?" So if we're talking about like when you're in the master's program to get the TA position, uh, I would say just like reaching out, like and like talking to the professors, uh, being like being consistent, but not annoying, but being consistent and uh, consistent like communication to the professor. Uh, so word I'm looking for, but I can't seem to. But yeah, so I would say just be be persistent in your outreach to the professor, whether that be like if you want a TA position, um, like for specific professors, like make sure to, if you have a class with them, make sure to talk to them after class, send follow-up emails, again, not too often. I'd probably recommend um, maybe like for the first email after 48 hours to a week, and then from there I'd probably say every week, but be persistent. um, Other than that, I would say uh, TA positions, um, the professor has to sign you off and they have to approve of you. So I personally never applied for a TA position. I know a lot of my friends did. Um, but yeah, the professor does have to like you. And but yeah, there are a lot of emails that get sent out, at least for UCLA. There's a lot of emails that get sent out for TA positions, like looking for TAs. So yeah, be timely. So when you see emails like that, if you really want a TA position, reach out immediately, send your resume, like just be prepared to hop on the opportunity when that time comes. Benjamin asks, how did you know which topic you want to specialize in? Did you do coursework and found that you enjoyed it? That's a great question. So, in terms of like the topics I enjoyed, I took yeah I took courses. I took courses to find out whether or not I liked them. So I didn't necessarily. A lot of colleges, um, when you do your master's, you will have to get a well, you have to like define what you specialize in. And but if I recall, like for instance, like USC, like it is very easy to change. Excuse me, to change like your specialization. But I would say mostly like, but if you didn't have that option, I would say uh, do a lot of exploring during your time here at Cal Poly. There's a lot of resources like the Computer Science Society, but there's a lot of resources to help you learn more about what's out there, what you can do with your degree, and what's next in it for you after you graduate. So I would say look into those. And if you are trying to figure it out while you're in your master's, I would just say, yeah, take classes that interest you. In fact, you could probably take a class without doing it for credit, but just like if you want to learn more about it, or just hop in a class that maybe one of your friends is in, and just go in there when you're not like during a time when you don't have class, and just kind of just learn it all, like touch everything, and just see if it's something that you're interested in. And then when you're interested in it, then try to go down the rabbit hole of like, okay, maybe I want to do capstone on this. Like, okay, what professors do this? And then reach out to those professors and start communicating with them. Okay, Rebecca asks, what are some tips for getting more recommendations from professors? So I would say um, I'd say like 90% of students, CS students will no, actually, I don't know. I would say like 80, 70% of CS students will never talk to their professors. Um, talk to professors. I think there's like, especially like when I took classes back at Cal Poly, there's a lot of people who just didn't talk to other people or talk to the professors. And I think this is counterintuitive. You are paying money and going to the school to not utilize the resources that are literally right in front of you. So I would say the biggest tip would be to just get to know your professors. Um, be persistent with your professors, and just if you're interested and you're genuinely interested and you have questions, they will most likely be happy to help you. Uh, During my time at Cal Poly, I didn't have an instance, or maybe one, but other than that one, every single professor has been very open and like very appreciative. Like I've like been very appreciative of the time that they've given me, um, hours of time where they just will talk, well, I'll talk to them, ask them stuff. So I'd say the biggest tip would be to just to get to know your professors, try to befriend them, um, and Yeah, just befriend your professors. Yeah, yeah, just say hi. Start with a hi, or like say like for instance like what personally what I did every time I go into class. Like I would start very simple. When I go into class, like good morning. Let's just take like Dr. Sun for example, right? For me, I like to refer like people who have PhDs with a doctor. So like let's say like Dr. Chen or Dr. Sun, right? So I'd go in and say, morning, Dr. Sun, and they'd say morning, right? Right, if they heard me or whatnot. And then when I leave, I just say, have a good day, Mr. Sun, Dr. Sun, right? So like you could start off like that, which is what I like to start off with every single professor I have. And especially since you guys are Cal Poly, the class sizes are small. So it's even easier to talk to professors when you're at like bigger schools like UCLA, and there's like 200 students in your class. It's hard, especially if you sit in the very back and like the professor's at the very front, and then he leaves. But yeah, that'd be my biggest tip. If I had any other tip, I'd probably say like do well in their class. um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, and then let's see. Can you say your program's focus? This is from Mark. Can you say your program's focus was your capstone's subject example AI? So I'd say my interests. I would say I did learn a lot, and I definitely think that okay. So my programs does not have a focus. It does not have an official focus. If you look at my degree, which is hung up on my wall, there is no focus. Um, what I did, my lab particularly was a lab that studied software engineering analytics, and so a lot of what we did was researching problems that software engineers face, and then attempting to find new solutions to solve those problems. Uh, One of the problem that I was working to solve in general was about this concept called fuzzing. And so fuzzing generally, if I like to very simply say, is just a way to automatically generate tests for like code. So let's say you have like a huge code base and you want to um, like analyze like for different bugs that might be in the code base. So like how do you do that? And like what are the tools to do that? What are the approaches to do that? Right? Do you like run the code? Do you not run the code? Right? So that's what like a big portion of what the research was on when I was there. My thesis was about a new fuzzing method um, that utilizes like a grammar to fuzz. If you guys want to read it, there is more detail on my LinkedIn. My thesis is on my LinkedIn, so um, yeah, you can check out my LinkedIn and read the paper or summarize it, put it into ChatGPT and summarize it or something. Okay, Christopher, how did you go about writing essays for your grad apps? Do you have any tips for writing them? So I think for you guys, I think the obvious answer would be an LLM, which I think you guys need to understand needs to be utilized correctly in the sense of like you need to use it to help you brainstorm and not like write your essays for you. I think in a sense they can write your essays for you, but like so like for like different wording and stuff like that. But um, I'd say like that's probably like be very careful when using that because there's obviously detectors now, and obviously there's like and those detectors might have like false alarms. So, but in general, I'd say like using like ChatGPT or like Gemini or whatever LLM you use can be very helpful for like brainstorming and getting your ideas together. Um, so I'd say probably that you use that to your advantage, but don't let it write for you because again, yeah, they have detectors and stuff. So um, yeah, and then I'd probably say for the rest, like the other tips, I'd probably say have start early. So if you are planning to let's see, if you're planning to apply this cycle, if some of you are like wanting to apply for grad school this cycle, which is pretty much like December this year, January of next year, um, start start now if you haven't started already. I say start early and just get like a rough draft as soon as possible, and then continue to iterate. Um, just continue iterating. Um, and until like you don't have time anymore. And I would say have other another tip would be to have other people look at it. For instance, I had one of the English professors at Cal Poly look at my essay because I got to know him, and I really enjoyed talking to him, and so he looked over my essay. That was cool. He also wrote me a letter of recommendation. Also very cool. Um, but yeah, I would say have other people look at your essays for you. Even friends work too. You start with friends, whatever. When you start having like a final version, then start sending like a more finalized version that you are like kind of like yeah, this seems okay. Then send it to like people that like maybe know more English or like know more about essays than you. So that's when I reached out to my professor, like to my English professor, and when I or yeah, I started reaching out to like some of my friends who I know who excel in writing essays and doing English in general. And then like another option would be to like hire a professional if you don't have like the professors or the people that that are really experts at writing essays. Then hire someone, right, on Fiverr or something. That's what I did. I mean, that's what I did, right? So I went on Fiverr and like, I think my essay is pretty good. Um, why not get this extra like iteration in. And so I sent it to someone at Fiverr, and like they gave a lot of feedback, and obviously it was useful. So uh, yeah, I'd say those are pretty much my tips for writing essays. Also just be like personable, show um yeah, be personable and write stories, not try not to write like yeah, try to write stories. Okay. Question here from Benjamin. During your time in a graduate program, did you ever find it stressful? If so, when does it usually feel stressful? Okay, so I think as a student, I think I'm generalizing here, uh, the student life is generally not incredibly stressful. You have a lot of downtime to do homework and not be in class, especially if you're not taking 18, 20 credits like I did. Um, some of you might be, which then I would say then I'm sure that's stressful. But I think school in general is uh, can be as stressful as you make it. I think for the most part, I think with like if you are like putting a lot of time to focus um, and do your work and study, I would say that students relatively have a lot of downtime. And I think that's even more of the case in grad school because a lot of the grad courses do not have homework, or the homework is very lax in terms of like requirements. And so there's a lot of like I had a couple courses where it's pretty much like there was no homework. Um, it's pretty much like a discussion almost. I think it was like the course I took was like network algorithmics. Um, very great professor, George Varghese, one of my favorite professors at UCLA. But he, yeah, there was like barely any homework. There was like, yeah, but it was a lot of discussion and like talking and like, getting to know like the topic that we're talking about. And you can go pretty much through your graduate program, your master's program in this particular instance without like it could be just very similar to your experience here at Cal Poly. Like it doesn't have to be different. Um, it's really like what you want to like put into it. So to give context, in my personal experience, grad school was I would say relatively stressful. The reason being, the reason why I did not graduate in a year was mostly due to the fact that I was in a car accident. This car accident was pretty gnarly. I wasn't in a car, so I was hit by a car uh, while I was like skateboarding across the street, and so that was pretty interesting, something to deal with. But I also, you know, I was hit a week after my wife gave birth to my son, and so tackling those two things along was I would say yeah, I would say it was relatively not easy. And so I would say that that was definitely the reason, like that was very difficult. And so trying to like that's why the first year was hard. The second year was mostly hard because I was trying to like just put a lot of time to research and just trying to like work a lot, while obviously taking care of my family and stuff like that. So um, and obviously like trying to network and go to events and etc. So um, I'd say to answer your question, uh, yes, definitely found grad school stressful. It doesn't have to be. Um, but I think if it's not stressful and you're not then if it's not stressful, then you're not making the most out of it. So and I guess to answer your point of when does it feel stressful, um, I'd say like if you're like really getting into the coursework, like if you're really interested in the topic and you start really diving into the coursework and going down that rabbit hole, it gets pretty stressful. I'd say like if you're working in a lab, the deadlines are pretty like the deadlines can be stressful, especially like when you if you like want to write a thesis or a capstone. Um, but yeah, I'd say like other than that, really up to you in terms of like when does it feel stressful. Like if you want to like do other things that might be stressful, but other than those things, I think relatively not stressful. I think it's similar to your experience here at Cal Poly. It's going to be kind of lax, unless, but just to know, like if you are entering like any, if you do go to a school that is um, more rigorous in terms of like coursework and difficulty. So I'd say like the jump from Cal Poly to UCLA was definitely like it's definitely noticeable. So like if you had an easy time with the classwork here, you probably won't have an easy time with the classwork there. So classes could also be an unseen source of stress. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Oh wait, I think that's the last question. But then we have like
Yeah,
a
last
class
question.
coming in. But yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Okay, so last question. How did I do well in college and graduate in 3 years? So that usually had to do with a lot of planning, priority registration, and a lot of planning, and just keeping my head down and studying, and not really messing about. Um, I think that those are mostly the things that helps, just being very organized, very systematic in like my schedule, backups for my schedule, and then just working pretty hard. Uh, and I also say like priority registration really helps because I'm sure a lot of you have like not gotten the classes that you wanted. So priority registration is definitely something I would recommend looking into if you are planning to graduate in 3 years. But uh, I definitely wouldn't recommend to graduate in 3 years. I think I with all that effort that I put into school, I didn't give a lot of a lot of time to like study for internships or do other things that I think that I would have preferred doing instead of graduating a year early. But yeah, yeah,
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Ricky, for
yeah.
speaking to us.
Of course, of course. Thank you guys for taking the time, and yeah, hope you all learned something today. Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can just search me up, just Ricky. Last name's Fok. Yeah, good luck with your CS journey, guys, and yeah, feel free to message me if you have any questions.